This is my story.
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 Elated and overjoyed.
Blessed. Perseverance.
Compassionate and forgiving.
Walk by the Spirit.
Encouragement.
Outpouring love.
Redemption.
Overwhelming.
Grace.
Faith.
Gateway.
Adolescence.
New.
A calling.
True love.
Grace and mercy.
Family. Persistence.
I knew I had Jesus in my heart from the time I was young, but my mother said wait, and we talked with the pastor, and we chose Mother's Day 1965 for my baptism, and that was my gift to my mother.
God came to me the night my dad left, and he showed up. The night another dad turned his back on me, and he showed me he was there. He showed me if I continue to persevere, he will continue to bless me, because he's not going anywhere.
My story probably began when I was 8, and the best part probably didn't start until last year when I renewed my faith in God. I became a strong Christian because of my fellowship with Christ and a personal relationship. And FCA and the people that are in FCA were the ones who brought me back to Christ and made me realize how lucky I was to be a Christian.
I came to Christ at a young age, but grew in Christ significantly when I was in college, towards the end of my college years. I came to know Christ at 6 or 7 years old, and then really learned what it was to walk as a Christian, to walk by the Spirit, as it says in Galatians. Teach me not carry out the desires of the flesh. Really walk a new life in Christ. And I met my future wife when I was in college. I really met Christians who were alive for Christ. And that made a huge impact on my life. Just really set me on fire, and the appreciation for what it was to be a Christian.
I went through a very difficult time. I had been married before and was divorced. Very disappointed in myself, disappointed in God, but then I realized that it wasn't about me, it was about the fact that I needed to say I needed somebody who could help me. Surrendering to Christ was the beginning of a wonderful relationship.
I remember when I was in the 6th grade, I was at a Wayne Kerr concert and I started crying uncontrollably. My cousin had a discussion with me that I had officially found Jesus.
When I was 17, my life took a different direction. And I started to drink a lot. I started to experiment with marijuana. And when I was 21, God's grace picked me up out of that. And I surrendered my life back to Him.
I grew up in a Christian home, and I had always known who Christ was, but I never started living through it until I really started believing that Christ was going to use me one day. So I needed to go to Him and find Him.
I grew up in a Christian family and thought I had things figured out, but then things got messy and God kind of put me in a place where I really needed Him, and that's kind of where I met Christ there.
I grew up in church, but there was a time in my life when I wasn't really following God and I was having a really hard time. And I don't know how, but somehow He changed me, and now it's not I who am living, but
I started to know
Jesus.
Christ through Gateway from my old pastor, Joey Bowen, and he just talked about God in a way that made it exciting.
The summer after 5th grade year at church camp, the youth leader told us that getting baptized wasn't all we needed to go to heaven. So that night I sat down with the leader and I did the ABCs. And, you know, that's all it took to make a real relationship with Christ.
I've always known who Jesus is, and I've grown up in a Christian family. But this summer, when my friend Emma died, I spent a lot of time in prayer and started reading my Bible a lot more, and Jesus just became real to me.
I've always grown up in a church family, and I play a lot of sports, and a lot of excuses got to me. And one time I was at church camp, and God was just calling me to get on the right path and show that I live for Him.
My story is about I've always grown up in a
Christian family, and I've learned God's love throughout my life. And every time I run over a bump, He's always there.
I lived in a house with an atheist brother, an atheist sister, and my mom was a Christian backslider. And then my sister started cutting herself and all that stuff. And then one day she got arrested, and I was just sad, and I called out unto God. And then about like a month later, I went to a revival, and God saved me.
Thankfully for family, my faith was always there. It was around the people who I cared about most. But at the same time, as you go through your own journey, you go through college, you find your own adventures adapting the world that you're growing up in. So having the resources, having friends and people that you rub elbows with help bring you closer to God through those relationships. So I feel very blessed, and I can definitely point to points where God was moving to protect me even though I wasn't always moving towards Him. So that gives me the, in my opinion, logical conclusion that He's always there. He's always available to me even though I'm not always searching for Him and I should be.